The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Telly Olson. I am back, and you are comfortably zoned with me, Ralph Tyko, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco. And it's the northern part of California, so things are pretty copacetic weather-wise. I feel for the folks out there. This has been a very long, horrible winter. My guest, one of them, is experiencing the winter as we speak. Bill Kashatus, Billy from Philly, is in Pennsylvania right now. How's the weather, my friend?
Oh, it's a balmy 35, and actually that's warm. We've had single digits for many days. So yes, you had to rub that in, Zig. That beautiful
weather.
Well, I
didn't have to, but it was an added pleasure. It was a bonus. The reason I do, because I grew up in New York, and
I know.
Where it was cold, and I suffered 21 winters before joining the Air Force. Never was it as cold on any day as it was cold last month in New York for an entire week. Now, one day when I grew up, was it like -6 or something like that, and they don't even take into account the wind chill. Anyway, Billy, we're going to talk about your terrific book, Suicide Squeeze, and we also have a guest who is portrayed in the book. Denise Garibaldi is here. You're on the West Coast, Denise. Billy, how did you and Denise, first, Denise, hello. Excuse
hello.
The confusion today that went through producing a podcast coast to coast. Very nice to meet you. We've been getting acquainted off air. The subject of the book is the tragic death of your son. I offered my condolences, wasn't able to find the words.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry, and I'm wondering how you came to meet Bill and share your story through him, which needs to be shared.
Thank you so much for the invitation of speaking today. Bill found me. He was interested in the subject, having boys of his own that had and still do play baseball. And he was very gracious in introducing himself and telling me the purpose of the book. And it was something I was always hoping that Rob's story would come to fruition in some kind of print. And Bill has just done the most phenomenal job. Not only has it been an accurate story of my family and my son, but the book has turned out to be quite academic as well. So it's a very valuable teaching tool.
Yeah,
in
fact,
it should answer the question of why steroids should not be allowed in baseball or condoned in baseball, simply because the idea of steroids is passed on to the youth of America. Am I right on track with the theme of the book, Bill?
Yeah. Just to backtrack a little bit, Denise, thank you for those kind words. Denise referred to the academic nature of the book. Academic yet readable, I think, for the general public. Choice Book Review actually, and this just came out last week, named Suicide Squeeze an outstanding academic title for 2017. So hopefully we'll get a little bit more exposure from that, because the sales haven't been as robust as we really wanted to. Denise is right. I came to this topic because I have two sons that play baseball, and one now in college. He was going through the tournament years, and I saw this phenomenon. I mean, starting when he was 15 and then worse when he was 16, where we're playing teams up and down the East Coast, and particularly those from Florida. For 15-year-olds, they look like fully developed men, and I could not understand that. And they were just killing us. I mean, just killing us. And sure, Floridians play baseball, but it was the physical size of these players that just astounded me. And you'd ask the other coaches, and they'd give you a wink and a smile. So you knew something was going on there. And the deeper I dug, the more discouraged I became, because I never thought much about steroids at the amateur level. I thought it was something that was pretty unique to the professional level. And if you recall, in 2005, Major League Baseball was taken to task by Congress for this, and they had congressional hearings on steroids in Major League Baseball. And Denise appeared at those hearings and gave a very impassioned presentation about her son Rob and what went on in his life. And my heart just went out to her, and also Donald Hooten, who is the president of the Taylor Hooten Foundation, the only nonprofit that works to educate parents, teachers, and coaches about steroids. Don lost his son, Taylor Hooten, to the same tragedy. But at any rate, Bud Selig, then the commissioner of baseball, made his campaign to rid the game of steroids. He wrapped that campaign really around Rob and Taylor. He said, Major League Baseball players are supposed to be role models for kids, and the players have woefully failed in this attempt. So he helped through Major League Baseball underwrite the Taylor Hooten Foundation and really give wide exposure to this ill. So that's how it all started, and then I had not seen a book-length treatment. I wanted to do this because I was just so upset about this, and I didn't realize that it was as rampant as it is.
How did it become rampant in the first place? What started the trend?
Well, the trend was really started by people like Jose Canseco, Mark McGuire, Sammy Sosa, all those guys who were power hitters and just, further than power hitters, just crushing the ball. In 1994, Major League Baseball went on strike, and one of the ways we brought the game back to the fans, or they brought the game back to the fans, was through home run hitting. And you remember that phenomenal race in, I guess it was 98, that McGuire and Sosa launched for the single-season record. McGuire broke it that season. And then, of course, Bonds got in on the act. And kids, you know how adolescents are, they operate under the radar. And steroid use was the biggest secret, open secret in baseball. Everybody in professional baseball knew it was going on. Everybody. And Denise will tell you, Rob knew that it was going on. And all these adolescents, they wanted to reach the next level, and they wanted to be power hitters, and that was the way to do it. So, they started using this stuff, and some of them started with nutritional supplements, 25% of which were laced with steroid precursors like andro and creatine, if not steroids themselves. And from there, it's a quick jump to using steroids. And this was because these kids wanted to be noticed by scouts and by Division I recruiters. This was the way to make it in their minds.
Well, let's note two things. When McGuire first started doing it, the law or the restrictions weren't yet set up.
Correct.
So that what he was doing, at least initially, was absolutely legal. And
Correct.
he as much as flaunted it by putting a bottle of stuff in his locker. I think that's how it first became evident. And Bud Selig knew, too, when the home run explosion went down, that it was being used. And baseball, from top to bottom, really presented a blind eye to the world about it at best.
Denise might want to talk a little bit about McGuire because he's pivotal in Rob's story.
Yes. Rob, growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, had two baseball heroes. Rob would say baseball was his life. Mark McGuire one, Barry Bonds the other. And Mark McGuire was found using a nutritional supplement, androstenedione, which was legal at the time. What wasn't legal at the time were anabolic steroids. I never understood how baseball players could use anabolic steroids and not be found to be committing a criminal act, given it was a Schedule III drug with the federal I'm sorry. So Rob learned at a very young age that supplements really helped him improve his strength and his endurance in being able to play ball and work out longer. Unfortunately, he also learned that if you wanted to get to the place he thought he needed to be successful either in college ball or major leagues, that he had to follow what Mark McGuire and Barry Bonds was doing. He found out long ago that this was the biggest secret in baseball, and he told me that himself. And before he passed, he said not only was it the biggest secret in baseball, but no one will believe it when that knowledge came down. So that's how I learned about Mark, and Rob being extremely upset at his breaking that record because Rob knew it was a lie.
And by this time, Rob, I'm trying to get the date straight here. Was it January of 2000 that Rob went to USC on a full baseball scholarship, Denise? That's
correct, yes.
Okay, so...
And went to the College World Series that year. Mm-hmm.
Right, this was 2 years before. Rob was one of the top 100 college prospects in the country, and he was a starting right fielder for the USC Trojans in the 2000 World Series, and he was Northern California Junior College Player of the Year in 1999. His numbers were off the charts, and we were trying to figure out as I was writing the book when exactly Rob started to use steroids, because part of the insidiousness of use is that it could be hidden. And the Garibaldis, Denise and her husband Ray, well, actually, Ray didn't know. I mean, Ray didn't know until Rob was really having problems. But they really didn't understand because they didn't know what the telltale signs of steroid use were. And Denise, it's very difficult, but if you could talk a little bit about Rob's journey, really when he was at Santa Rosa first, and how he got involved, or how you think he got involved.
After high school graduation, Rob started going to health food stores and really building up. He and a friend actually took a trip to Tijuana, Mexico, right after, and purchased illegal steroids in Tijuana, Mexico. And that whole process by which you need a doctor's prescription and the purchase of the steroids and needles took him about 2 hours to get back across the border into the United States. Rob apparently had a friend who instructed him how to use steroids, and he was very conscious of how to do it correctly. The thing about steroids is that once you start and you see how successful you are using them, Rob tended to get more or less addicted to them in the long run. So the cycles became longer, and Rob really became what I would say mentally ill using them. So what we saw really mimicked something like depression or bipolar disorder, and I believe that was the case. So when we were looking for help for Rob, that's what we sought out, was that kind of help. And unfortunately, Rob did not tell anyone, not even the psychiatrist at the time, that it was the steroids that were causing the problem. So
again, I mean, this is part of the insidiousness of steroid use, and Rob's situation became worse when he went to USC. I mean, this is a young man who was a five-tool player, and for listeners, five-tool players are people who can run, throw, hit for power, and throw. Actually, correction, he was a four-tool player until he began taking anabolic steroids. That fifth tool is what he was seeking, and
to hit for power.
Hitting for power, yeah.
Yes.
So
how? What symptoms were there when he was getting sick physically?
The only physical problem he had as far as his body had to do with tendons pulling away from his throwing arm, which is a result of steroid use. And I didn't know any of that at the time when he was going to physical therapy. So the other symptoms, many of which I did not physically see because Rob was very good at concealing his acne on his back and chest. He said he started male pattern balding because of his baseball hats, which he never took off. And that's not true. So mentally, however, Rob became very depressed, despondent, and energized to a place where he looked like he was manic. But the telltale sign of steroid use was indeed what is considered roid rage. And Rob had a number of incidents of roid rage within the family, which really caused me to call the police finally and to see what was really going on with him.
There's something that people should understand. There are two types of steroids. There are what are called mass muscle builders, obviously to develop muscle, get a bigger body. This is what a lot of the players took because not only does it build mass, but it also helps with their endurance and it helps them recover from injury pretty quickly. And the steroid of choice is called decaderobalin. And Rob, although I'm not sure if it was Deca, but he was taking mass muscle builders. There is another type of steroid, and these are lean muscle builders. These are taken for people who want greater definition. They also have the same effect in terms of endurance and heightening one's speed. So, if you want to improve your base running, you develop fast twitch muscles, that's the steroid of choice. Now, Major League Baseball players take both. But with a young man like Rob, he was so eager and so desperate to reach that goal that he was what they call stacking, taking back-to-back steroids, because when the steroid user uses, they go on a cycle. To start with, it's usually 5-6 weeks, then they're supposed to get off for an equal amount of time. Well, Rob wouldn't do that. He'd just keep on going. And this was one very serious problem because it results in roid rage. There are a number of other issues. Denise referred to muscles pulling away from tendons, very common. There are also dangers of liver disease, impotence, balding, really.
Oh, the acne, acne.
I mean, a lot of this stuff. But what amazed me about Rob was that he really believed that he was doing something that was healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is not a kid who came from a sordid drug culture. I mean, he came from a good, solid, middle-class family with good values. I mean, the Garibaldis are wonderful people who did all who raised their sons the way you're supposed to raise a kid. They cared.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. And Rob, he would never take recreational drugs. Never. But steroids, he thought, were good for him, were healthy. That's the irony.
Where did his misinformation come from?
It was where he was getting the drugs. You have a cohort of kids that are just experimenting. They hear about it. And the problem is the type of steroids there were in the sense that they were veterinary grade. These were not steroids made for human beings. They were not designer drugs like Mark McGuire and Barry Bonds used. These were very primitive drugs that they were getting for a minimal amount of money over the border. And so there was a lot of misinformation. He did not realize what he was doing. And
are there no testing at the NCAA level, at college level?
Yes, there is testing, but no one was testing for steroids back then. They're testing for other kinds of, yeah.
Right.
So, and there's still minimal testing, even though Major League Baseball now has a protocol in place.
The testing's another problem. I mean, Denise campaigned across California with then State Senator Jackie Speer, who is now in the United States House of Representatives, and was pushing for some kind of protocol and also just to keep these kids away from this stuff. Don Hooton down in Texas was pushing for testing, and then, basically he just said, forget it, it's a deterrent because there are 120 different types of steroids. Well, you need almost 120 different tests to detect them. I mean, that's how difficult it is, to pick up steroid use by testing. And the testing that was done initially was for recreational drug use, and that's not going to detect steroids. A completely different test. So this is yet another part of the insidiousness of the entire use of steroids by athletes.
To say nothing of the masking that the players use to fool the chemists, to fool the
and the
testers.
kids do that too. They got their hands on the clear and the green. In fact, when Biogenesis, the outfit in Florida, was discovered, you know how they were initially led on? Parents were going into that place to buy steroids for their kids. Amazing. It's just unbelievable.
Well, a lot of it comes down to that Nick Ballesteri breed your kid kind of way that's going on in society, where parents are putting their kids in travel teams and just everything goes into breeding the kid for athletic success, and with that comes the community of folks that do use and do cheat the system, but the rewards are out there. You can see why somebody would go for the carrot with the contracts that are being signed. Well, I'll take steroids for a while, I'll make the big bucks, and then I'll stop. It goes through your head. That's a societal thing. That's the pressures of putting money ahead of well-being. And you have to blame the players' union for that, too. They would protect players from the testing in the interest, we're protecting their career and assuring that their money keeps coming in. But you know what? Health is a lot more important than money, and they never get that counseling from the union. So it was just not only baseball colluding, everybody in baseball, in management side, is the player side too collude. The unions would tell players when they would be tested and what have you. So they have to assume the responsibility, just as baseball does.
One thing, and maybe I was living in my own little dreamland, but one thing I learned from writing this book is that the bottom line in NCAA Division I is to win. And I don't care if it's football or basketball. We all know football and basketball, but it's in baseball too. It's winning. That's what those coaches are paid for. In fact, Mike Gillespie, who was the coach at USC back at when Rob was going to school there, he even said, "I'm here to win." Now, to me, that's an abomination. You're an educator. If you're associated with a educational institution, I don't care if it's primary, secondary, undergraduate, you are an educator. You are a teacher coach. And yet, where are these drugs rampant? At the Division I level and at the junior college level. And, Rob Garibaldi was part of a very, very elite group of ball players of the 200,000 collegiate baseball players at all levels, and both NCAA and NAIA, only 5.3% get any kind of scholarship money. Okay, so we're talking about a young man who, again, I mean, you can even narrow his company.
This Pac-10 baseball is so big. So many players come out of Cal and Northridge, and it's semi-pro. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
And just as the other sports are semi-pro, and I can see the allure, how you could have been fooled wearing rose-colored glasses, because baseball isn't football. It isn't. It isn't the one and out of college basketball, what it's become. Baseball hasn't had, on a collegiate level, the history of scandals that college basketball has had, and the numerous books that have been written about how college football is nothing but a meat factory. Meat on the hoof, for instance. We knew it. We just didn't know it with baseball. And
that's why this use in baseball and also in the Olympics, where you have even younger players and athletes, why it was such a travesty, because baseball was supposed to have been the one sport that anyone with a little bit of talent and a lot of dedication could play baseball. You did not have to be part of a meat factory in order to play that game. Rob started out, he was 5 feet 11 inches, and when he started at Santa Rosa Junior College, he was 135 pounds. So it was there he was told he had to get bigger and stronger and faster. And that was the message he had received since he was just in high school. So it got to the point when the nutritional supplements weren't doing the job any longer in his mind. He just went to the next step, and the next step was anabolic steroids.
And that's code, by the way. Those words that Denise used, that is the code. Because particularly, among high school kids, college kids, when a coach tells you got to get bigger, well, they know how to do it. They're going to go to steroids.
Right.
Now, did the coach say that? No, never. But here's the issue. Many of them know what's really going on. And I think the issue that steroids raises is what is the moral responsibility of not only the teacher coach, but also the school, as opposed to the legal responsibilities. Because legally, particularly when you get into undergraduate education, there's only so much a professor, a coach can do, because you're meddling in the private affairs of an individual. And, there's a legal line there. But morally, there is still a responsibility. And I personally felt that, the institution in that sense failed Rob morally, not legally, morally.
Okay. I know that for both of you, writing the book was cathartic. Your story being told, Denise, has to have been cathartic. Since the book came out, have you seen anything positive come out of it? Has it made an impression on anybody who's taking some action that they wouldn't have taken?
The major thing I have seen is that, as far as I know, there hasn't been another Rob Garibaldi or a Taylor Hooten. people are aware the education that has taken place since 2005 when I went to Congress to testify about Rob's story and rampant use. People did hear and pay attention, so much so that it's even old news now. People are much more interested in the other designer drugs that are beginning to happen, or even designer babies. The manipulation of embryos is happening so we can have a more stellar athlete. So there hasn't been another Robert Taylor, and I have to say that educationally that had to have made a difference.
Nice that you see something concrete, because the cathartic part would have been enough. I'm sure just getting it out, just talking to people about it. You could have gone the other way into a shell and refused Bill's approach to you, and you wouldn't have been blamed in any way for so doing. You're a bit of a heroine, young lady.
Oh, thank you. That seems like a big word for me. At the time, I was a mom. I was a mom who wanted to save her son and not given the pieces I needed to do in order to do that. The worst thing could have happened.
Going out in the world and wearing your feelings and letting the world see you and experiencing your grief with the world and sharing that. Has to make a big difference in society. Bill, you're to be commended for your choice of subject. Thank you.
Hey, thank
you.
Thank
you so much.
I just, can't emphasize.
No, I wasn't ending the interview. I just stopping in the middle to thank you for doing what you're doing for society, doing what you did for society in this case.
Denise and her late husband, Ray Garibaldi, are, to me, role models of what parents should be. They're compassionate people. They were courageous for telling their story. Cathartic is really an understatement. I remember having conversations with Denise where both of us are in tears.
Yes.
When you write baseball history, you don't have those kinds of emotions. When you write a book like this, you become angry, you become shell-shocked, you become very, very sad.
You become afraid. As a parent, I was telling Denise off the air, my son is 27. My son grew up, obviously as an adolescent. You become more and more worried that tragedy or something like that could happen to you. No doubt. That's part of it. Your protectiveness, protective senses go up.
And again, the courage, I cannot understate that because, I ended up interviewing for the book probably about 24 people. I could have easily interviewed a dozen more that were connected with Rob's story and Taylor's story, but people refused to talk. They didn't want to talk about it, and this is part of the toxic nature of steroid use. People just don't want to talk. They don't want to share the story. It's too hard, or they feel as if, they're going to come out like the criminal. You need to talk about this because, the time that this book was published, the estimated numbers of adolescents using steroids were 1.5 million. Okay? Now, let's put that number in perspective. 1.5 million adolescents. If you took all the NFL and Major League Baseball players who were using steroids during the steroids era, if you put them together, they wouldn't even fill the bleachers in your normal public high school football stadium. But if you take that number, 1.5, and it's grown, I'm sure it's grown since the book came out.
Girls.
Yeah, because of girls. Girls are the fastest growing group. But if you take
first time I've ever heard that.
Yeah. But if you take that
together, they're getting free rides, scholarships, this, that, and the other thing.
Oh no, it's not that. It's appearance. It's appearance. They're not even athletes. The reason we call these APEDs is because they're appearance and performance enhancing drugs. Winstrol and that whole classification of steroid is what these kids are taking. But back to that 1.5, if you take that 1.5 adolescents that are using steroids, they would fill every single major league stadium in this country. That is how big this problem is.
Wow.
And people deny it. People deny it because of the dividends, the supposed dividends.
Bill, what did you tell your boys about this when you were writing the book? What did you share with them?
Well, the straw that broke the camel's back for me was my son. When my son actually became 16, he said, "Dad, I want to be your son. This is not the coach-player thing is not working anymore. I want to go to another team." And as much as it hurt me, I said, "Fine." Well, he went to a tournament team that was pushing nutritional supplements and more. And Peter refused. Peter absolutely refused, and he was benched. So now, is there a one-on-one correlation to that? I don't know. You tell me. And
more than likely.
I was just infuriated because, once again, my kid is just under 6 feet. He was, when he was playing in high school, he's about 150 pounds. And he was nowhere near the player Rob was, but one of the things they wanted from him was power hitting. And he wasn't. He was a singles hitter, occasional doubles, but he couldn't put the ball over the fence. And this is what they told him. You got to get bigger. So, as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this issue because not enough is being done.
Two things come to mind from this interview. First of all, it's understated the effects of how steroids affect your personality, one's personality. And it doesn't have to be anabolic steroids. It could be something, a drug one takes, prednisone, for instance, which is a steroidal.
A corticoid steroid.
Yeah.
Corticoid, yeah.
It will change your personality. And people are prescribed that for a number of different, lupus, for instance, and there's the big trade-off of that. And number two, you mentioned that steroids are a Class 3 drug according to the federal government. Well, let me tell you something. Marijuana is a Class 1.
That's thing. Right. That's right.
Now, it all starts, there's something wrong with that. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
And that's what stood out to me when you said that. And it's severe. Class 3 is a severe. It should be Class 1. Marijuana should be 3 maybe, or leave it 1, but at least put steroids as 1 as well. So the government has to take some responsibility for that.
That's right. Oh, definitely. The federal government has dropped the ball on this. I mean, the first thing they should do is remove that classification 3 and put it as classification 1. That's the very first thing they should do. The second thing they should do, well, once they do that, then the sentencing guidelines become much stiffer for people who are selling this stuff and distributing it. And that's another problem. I mean, in Taylor Hooton's case, the Hootons knew the young man who was providing these drugs to Taylor. And the Plano Police Department says, we could investigate him and everything else, but the amount of drugs that are going to have to be on him for us to prosecute is unheard of. And even then, he's going to walk away scot-free. So that's the very first thing they got to do. The second thing they got to do is basically continue, with these. I forget the name of the. It was the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the Justice Department. They conducted these.
The raids?
Yeah, the raids. God, I'm forgetting the names of them and everything else. Operation Gear Grinder was one of them. Operation Raw Deal was, 2002. Operation Equine. These are raids that resulted in the convictions of more than 200 distributors and the seizure of millions of dollars of steroids. And those raids slowed the flow of these raw steroids into the U.S. from Mexico and China in particular. But, the sad thing about this is you can go online. Bodybuilders do this all the time. You can go online and a kid could, get oral steroids for, $100 for a bottle of pills. So it's very accessible. And that's got to stop. And the final thing is that I think the government has got to provide more money for medical research into creating a protocol on how to wean these kids off steroids because it's extremely difficult. When you're weaning off, and this is one of the reasons, Rob stacked. He just went back to back to back because when the steroids are coming out of your system, you go down, pretty low. You're pretty depressed. People say, well, they're not chemically addictive. Well, maybe not, but they're psychologically addictive. And the kid is getting depressed, so they go back to it. And in addition, what do counselors and psychiatrists give to the kid for depression? Well, they give them an antidepressant. You mix antidepressants with steroids, and you're an adolescent who's going through hormonal changes already. That is an equation for suicide. So there must be a safe protocol for weaning these adolescents off the drug, and we've got to advance that research. So those are three things the government can do immediately. And by the way, they've been pretty silent. I mean, ever since 2005, they just kind of seem to wash their hands of it. They've done nothing.
Well, whatever Congress does, they first have to ask big business, and big business, in this case, the drug companies.
That's right.
So they control Congress. As I go back to Pygmalion and Shaw, and talking about that, George Bernard Shaw. Mm-hmm. It's the way the world is. That's what's got to be stopped. We've got to put a rein on big farms.
That's right.
Now, where are the changes taking place, Bill, since you wrote the book?
Well, I do think that increasingly schools are, doing more than paying lip service to it. It used to be in the immediate wake of the Garibaldi and Taylor Hooton suicides. In the wake of that, it was thrown to health class. that they will cover that topic. And, many didn't even bother doing that. But now what I'm seeing is in orientation meetings at the beginning of the school year, that now the teachers and teacher coaches are beginning to talk about this. And that's great, because that's another place where we need change. I think they're only beginning to talk about this and tell parents about the symptoms to look for with steroid use. But I'm an advocate, and Denise could talk about her experience with out in California with this, because Jackie Spear did get a law passed that had some of these elements of it. But to me, I think there's got to be a crackdown. Say, for example, if a kid is, any one player on the team is caught using steroids, well, then the team gets punished. If they're eligible for playoffs or postseason, that gets taken away. Then all of a sudden you'll see it stop. Because
how do you get the book to be a textbook in every dugout in college, high school baseball, pro baseball? How do you get it read by the actual players who are going through it one way or the other?
Well, I don't think you do. I mean, it's not going to happen in big school programs. I mean, the changes I've seen have come in private schools and small schools, what we call in Pennsylvania Class A schools, maybe some double A schools. But, we got 5A schools in this state. And those are where the major athletic programs are, Class 5A. And kids themselves, they feel they're invincible. They don't feel that this is going to affect them. I just don't know. When Don Hooten and I were talking about the book, he said, who you got to put this book into the hands of? Mothers. Mothers. You put this book in the hands of mothers, you're going to see what's happening to football right now. The mothers, because of concussions, are, discouraging their kids from playing football. Well, same thing here. You put this book in the hands of mothers, then all of a sudden there's going to be some activity. Because guaranteed, dads who have that desire to see their kid go to the next stage, get a college scholarship for baseball, get noticed by the pros, get drafted, they're going to minimize, the dangers of this, but not moms. Not moms. And that's why
Very good point.
That's why Denise is invaluable here. Invaluable.
Denise, when Rob came out of high school, did he have the choice of going to college or the pros? Was he drafted in the pros, by the pros?
No, not out of high school. He was drafted by the New York Yankees after 1999 when he had a stellar year. His batting average was .459 that year. So he was drafted. He chose to go to college because
now this is out of community college.
Community college, right. But he chose to go to the 4-year university because he needed more time to build his body bigger and faster and stronger. He felt he would not have made it through the first year in the minor leagues. So he was buying himself more time. Gotcha.
Was he able to finish at USC? Was he able to become degreed?
He was 6 units away from graduating. So even though during this whole process when he was so terribly ill, we would talk about what would come after baseball. And we were preparing him for after baseball. And we had long conversations about what else he could do. He wanted to work with kids. He wanted to be a coach, but he was interested in becoming a social worker. And he just said, not yet. I have to have this done first. I have to stand at least once at home plate and take a swing on a major league field.
And one of the sad things for me about Rob's story is Denise shared with me some of his journal writings and some of his papers from junior college. This young man was a writer. He could have been a wonderful writer. If he wanted baseball, he could have shifted his attentions into journalism and been just a crack baseball writer. And that's what's a shame, because you could tell in his writing the depth of the thought. Plus, he was just funny. I mean, he wrote an essay about, I guess, what was it, Denise, cleaning up how to
clean up your bedroom. Yeah.
Yeah, which was a landmine. And it was one of the funniest pieces I've ever read, So he
in the end,
talent.
Mom comes and helps.
Yep. That was the final piece. Leave it up to Mom. But he had other talents, not just baseball, and that's the shame.
Good. I'm glad we got to share this with the world a little bit, because I wish I had. Best thing I can tell you, I wish I had known him. That's
So do I.
Yeah.
So do I.
He's
very
referred
exceptional.
to in our family as a comet. He was very bright, very funny, very instrumental in our family, and then he wasn't there anymore.
Let's leave it at that. I don't think I can find the words to top those words. He wasn't there anymore. And,
but his legacy could help so many other people, and we've just taken the first step in that legacy, by getting baseball to rid itself of it, Major League Baseball to rid itself of this. The next step is to get the kids to stop.
And I have to say that as a mother, there's no greater gift than to know that your child's life meant something. Mm-hmm. So that's how I sleep at night. He was important.
Boy, that is so close to a Jackie Robinson quote. Jackie said, there is no life that's important unless you're serving, or something to that effect. And, well, thank you, Denise Garibaldi. Thank you,
You're welcome.
Kashatus. This has been an enlightening yet incredibly sad show for me.
Thank you, Beth.
Thanks for having us.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I will be back in good time.